Hello. Please forgive me. Things are a little hazy right now. Genuinely, we were in the middle of some kind of magical fog cloud. At least 3 of us were. Myself and Seth at a bar table, Mia on stage with 2 fellow students, and Bustin. Bustin is somewhere. Somewhere with a man wearing white armour, trying to fashion knuckle dusters out of who knows what. Mia, with her companions Sham and Amy, caught sight of an explosion at the docks before the thickness of the fog cloud obscured her vision almost completely, and a magical silence descended. She reached out for Sham, attempting to find him in the fog, but he was no longer at her side. She stepped in a puddle located in the area where he had been standing as she moved to try to locate him, and, in her head, she heard the voice of the High Wizard saying, "They've taken it! They've taken it!" A voice, it seemed, we all heard. I thought back, taken what? And where? But received no response. I could see other people in the square looking at each other in consternation, slowly transcending into panic. As I was processing this, Seth took out his tinderbox and lit a match, flinging it into the fog before I could stop him. It vanished into the cloud, unable to counter the magical effect. At first, it seemed it had fizzled out, but then a larger light began to glow and flicker as silently screaming townsfolk came charging towards us, knocking Seth and I prone, causing 2 points of damage each. I crawled under the table whilst Seth managed to backflip to land on the top of it. Show off. Mia, now also panicking, cast Destroy Water and managed to move the fog in a 10-foot radius around her up, giving her a clearer view of the square. She could now see both Sham and Amy were gone, and what she thought originally was a puddle was actually a trail of water leading back across the stage towards where they had come from before their performance. She could tell it was probably made by something wet being dragged, something or someone. She also caught sight of the High Wizard's staff poking through the fog, the tip smoking slightly with the dregs of his spell. She ignored it, her only thought to get to Sham. She noticed a figure, about her height, standing still, largely obscured by the thick fog. All she could make out was that they were wearing red and humanoid in shape. Thinking it was a guard, she made the decision to carefully approach. She used her cantrip to manipulate the fog, allowing her to sneak closer. She quickly discerned it was a guard who looked more than a little panicked. The front of his uniform was wet from the neck to the legs. He had some kind of wooden cross up by his ear and was trying to speak into it. Mia walked up to him and tried to ask where Sham was. He spun round, the silence preventing him from detecting her approach or hearing the words she tried to speak. Reaching for his club, it was then that something glowing arced through the air, landing gently on his head and setting it immediately alight. He barely had time to register what was happening before he slumped to the ground, the flames spreading and enveloping him. The fog began to gradually clear, revealing a large woman in an ornately feathered hat that was now burning merrily away. She ran aimlessly, shrieking and flapping, though no sound could be heard. Most of the citizens had fled the area. We could now see the High Wizard pointing his staff towards Mia, and we all heard his voice in our heads again, urging us to go and get the gift back from whomever had taken it. Seth made a sign to ask if I was okay, then ran off towards the dock. I scrambled out from under the table, looked at Mia, and was about to take off after Seth when the wizard telepathically communicated to us that the guards had taken the gift. As the clouds cleared, I became aware of a second guard on the stage, standing, stock still with a strange expression frozen on his face. Seeing it would probably be futile trying to get any information from him, I chose to run towards the fallen guard, whom I could see, smoking, on the stage by the large bowl in which the gift had been placed. A bowl that was now empty. Mia, seeing me run towards her and completely ignoring the woman who was on fire, ran towards me and grabbed me. Our eyes met, the intensity of our gazes allowing us to almost communicate telepathically, as time seemed to slow, drifting embers floating in the air around us. No sound, as everything else momentarily faded out of existence. I gently cast light on her hand, causing it to glow the same colour as her mesmerising golden eyes. As we turned to go after Seth, Mia alone heard the voice of the wizard in her head, telling her to take something, that she would need it, as it was her duty to recover the gift. A small stone with the carving of a face on one side and a runic symbol on the other flew through the air towards her. She deftly caught it, barely taking her eyes from mine. As she did so, she glimpsed the High Wizard fall to his knees, and the guard who had been standing on the stage, no longer immobilized, turning and moving towards him. Seth, running towards the port and the source of the explosion, realized that he was beginning to hear sounds again. As he got closer to his destination, he became aware there were fewer people around. He could see the flames from the blast, which seemed to be coming from the bay, where the ship he had been so interested in earlier was docked. As he ran, it quickly became apparent that the figures he could make out in the area were guards. None of them paid any heed to Seth. All of them focused on a solitary guard who was holding something and slowly making his way towards the others grouped on the dock. Mia didn't notice anything as she kept on running, but I caught sight of Seth up ahead, standing, surveying the area briefly before he continued towards the guards. They all noticed him rushing headlong into their midst, though he tried to be stealthy. To be fair, a 6'1" half-orc running full pelt is kind of hard to miss. They began to reach for their weapons. Wasting no time, Seth drew his short bow and shot at the nearest one, hitting him for 6 points. He moved towards him and took out his short sword, swiping at him again, but missing. Seeing the commotion, the single guard carrying the object broke into a run towards the others. One of the other guards on the dock reached into a bag and threw a net over Seth, restraining him. Seth was able to make out a golden cage in the hands of the guard the others had been so focused on. The guard who had thrown the net backed off, firing an arrow as he did so, hitting Seth in the leg for 2 points of damage before ducking behind a stall. Another guard took aim at Seth as Mia and I finally caught up. Seeing that the situation had clearly become hostile, I rushed towards the guard with the cage and cast Entangle, reaching out my hand and summoning vines up from the ground. They began to wrap themselves around the guard I had targeted, plus another 3 in the area, wrapping them in thick, strong stems. None of them were able to break free, and found themselves held in place by the spell. I concentrated, whilst Mia took aim at the guard closest to her and sent out a firebolt. He was watching Seth and unaware of her presence. Never having been in combat before, and unsure of quite how to control her magic, she missed him, sending a blazing flame into the ocean and drawing the attention of the guard. She took out the stone given to her by the High Wizard and threw it into the middle of the fray. It landed, seemingly having no effect. One of the guards failed to break free from the vines I had trapped him in, swinging his club ineffectually at them. Seth, meanwhile, managed to tear his way out of the net. He strolled up to the nearest guard, almost casually, and again attacked with his sword. This time he hit, inflicting 5 points of damage. The guard stared back, wounded and terrified, as Seth licked the blade of his sword and smiled. Unable to move as my vines secured him, the man grimaced as a foul stench began to fill the air, his red trousers turning to a darker brown. The guard with the cage managed to break free and slowly made his way over the difficult terrain towards the ships. Another guard raced forward, shouting, and a further one appeared on the ship that the guards were clearly heading towards. Mia heard one guard shout out, "He's a slippery shit. He's difficult to move." And she saw Sham being dragged towards the ship. Whilst she was distracted, the guard she had failed to fricassee ran up and bopped her over the head with his club, doing 3 points of bludgeoning damage. I threw out my thorn whip towards the guard with the cage, but it became lost among the vines on the ground. Seeing that Mia was clearly distressed by something, I turned and moved towards the direction she was looking in. She ignored the guard attempting to batter her and ran towards the ship, again casting firebolt directly at the main mast. This time she hit. The wood ignited in a glorious blaze, spreading to the furled sails. Sham struggled with his captor, trying ineffectually to break free. The guards caught in my vines also failed to escape their grasp. Seth walked away in disdain from the guard who had shot himself and moved towards the one holding the cage. He took aim with his longbow, hitting him for 4 points. He took a swipe with his sword at one of the guards still held in place by the vines, dealing 7 points of damage as he sliced across his face. The guard with the cage managed to scramble clear of the difficult terrain and then cast magical darkness in a sphere around him and a few others on the dock, leading to a different boat. The guard who had previously attacked Mia ran up behind her, trying to pull a net from his bag, but it got stuck. He looked slightly embarrassed as he stood behind her, wrestling with the tangled mesh. Deducing that Mia seemed to be concerned about the strange-looking fish boy, I lashed out with my thorn whip to catch Sham. The thorny vine wrapped itself around his neck, easily pulling him free from the guard's grasp, but inflicting 3 points of damage in the process. Sham fell into the water as the spell dissipated. A few small bubbles popped on the surface. Mia tried to message him, but got only a faint gurgling sound. Then silence. Mia, fear giving her superhuman, or super-elven, strength, pushed a nearby wagon into the water to try to rescue him. Seth was going to town on the guards still caught in the vines. He deftly beheaded one of them with ease, then headed into the darkness. He felt another net go over him. There was a loud splash as the guard who'd been holding Sham jumped into the water to chase down his quarry. The guard who'd got his net stuck ran up to try to grapple me. I easily disarmed him and took his club, then backed off, just as the final guard, still caught in my vines, managed to break free at last. He wasted no time in racing towards the darkness. Mia, floating on her wooden wagon, cast shape water to make it opaque, in the hope she could catch sight of Sham. She couldn't see her friend, but seeing the guard swimming down, she dived in after them both. Seth was once again able to break free of the net draped over him and backed out of the darkness, straight into the guard who had just broken free from the vines. Seth tried to hit him, but missed. He was, however, able to nimbly dodge any attacks the guards tried to land on him. The magical darkness faded, revealing the guard with the cage approaching the smaller boat, yelling, "The line! The line! Take it!" A man clad in white armour appeared and caught the cage as the guard threw it to him. As the lead guard shouted to the others to retreat, I tried to talk Verlaine down. Unfortunately, I'm not the most charismatic of people. My offer of Buston's coat as a gift was declined, since Verlaine felt the black fur would clash with his all-white look. He also didn't appreciate my offer of lighting up the suit, and ordered the guards to take me. One approached apologetically with a net. I burst into crocodile tears standing next to Seth, hoping my act was convincing. Clearly, it was not. Another guard dived into the water with a loud splash. Mia, underwater, remembered that Sham species can breathe underwater, but it's a skill they have to master. Since she was injured and not a natural swimmer, she made the decision to come back to the surface. A clever use of shape water to freeze the guard who she'd noticed had entered the water above her allowed her to grab onto him, using him as a flotation aid to get to the top. She was able to haul herself back onto the dock, soaked and shivering. Seth and I watched as Verlaine disappeared into a cabin. The gangplank was pulled in and the boat began to sail away. The guards left on the dock looked confused, clearly having thought they were going to go together. Seth, undeterred, continued his rampage, joyfully slaughtering them. He plunged his short sword into the liver of one guard, leaving him to bleed out slowly. He licked the black blood from his sword and smiled at the mortally wounded man. Horrified by this action, I dropped my concentration and the vines disappeared. Terrified, the uninjured guard ran and jumped onto the ship, clinging to it as it sailed away. Only one living guard remained on land, and he disarmed Seth, taking his sword and running to prepare to jump onto the ship. The feet of the frozen guard were still twitching, so he was still alive, but trapped. I backed off to help Mia, crying for real now after what I had just witnessed. Mia looked at me with concern, shivering with cold, so I offered her Buston's coat. She reluctantly took it, not wanting to cover her official Hightower robes. She prepared a magic missile, waiting for the submerged guard to appear, hopefully with Sham in tow. Seth, spewing expletives in anger at having his sword stolen, went for the guard who had taken it. He reeled back in pain, 11 points of damage almost, but not quite, finishing him. Seth moved up behind him, drawing his second short sword, and with a savage attack, stabbed him from behind through the ribs and into the lungs. The man let out a silent scream as he died. I looked into the water and saw a dark shape coming up. I grabbed Mia's hand and pointed, introducing myself as Kaysera and telling her that she was the most beautiful creature I'd ever seen, with her golden skin. We made introductions and exchanged pleasantries whilst we waited for whatever was coming up to arrive. I informed her I wasn't friends with Seth, and I didn't trust him. Mia looked into the water at the shape I'd seen, thinking it seemed too small to be a guard. We both knelt down and put a hand into the water, reaching towards whatever it was, Mia's hand still emitting a gentle golden glow. Seth carved Verlaine's name into the body of his latest kill, then came over towards us. He rolled a natural 1 and had no idea what we were doing, nor that his brutality had affected me in any way. Mia and I found ourselves grabbing something small, something furry. Pulling it out together, we realised it was the severed head of a guard, with a biscuit sticking in one of the eyes. A biscuit that Mia recalled giving to Sham, and that he told her he was unable to eat, but would find some use for. Our experiences had made us stronger, but all I wanted was to be back with my favourite banana tree, feeling its familiar rough trunk. Somehow, I suspect it may be some time before I can do that again.